Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. This is Nomad, and I talk about financial and location independence on this channel, and I share tools, tips, and techniques that help you make a living and a life. If this is of interest to you, go ahead and click the subscribe button and the notification bell to be notified when new videos on these topics are coming out. Doing my best to get as many out as I can and make more of these to provide more information and help, because this is what I like doing. So also click like, go ahead and slap that like button right now. But I want to get started and talk about a topic that I hear about a lot. A lot of people aren't sure how to get started with remote work abroad. They see these wonderful Instagram accounts, such as mine, but it's mostly food. I mean, if you like food, follow my Instagram account at the Coco Nomad. But I do talk about here and on the podcast ways to be better at remote work, ways to prepare yourself, the things that you don't want to think about that most people don't really talk about. It's more than just getting a job. It's more than just maybe convincing an employer. And now we're in a day and age in these last couple of years where more people have been thrown into remote work, but they haven't really thought about what that means and how to operate. So just kind of had to figure it out as they go, both individuals and companies. And now some of them are sort of wrestling with that and don't know whether to return or to do a hybrid. And there's a lot of back and forth. And so things are still up in the air. But if you are proactive and intentional about creating that for yourself or for your company or for your team, I want you to talk about some things that you really want to have in place. I have been working remotely for over a decade. I started my first foray into working remotely, actually started in 2002. And then I started doing it again steadily right around 2008, 2009, 2010. And I became a full-time remote worker since then. So I've had a lot of experience working both for companies, in teams, different organizations, and understanding the different dynamics. So I wanted to share a little bit about this and maybe give you sort of a framework and a game plan if you're starting from an office and going in and you want to progress into working remotely, or you want to take your team, your company to do that. And the first thing I think is really important, is absolutely vital to understand that because you're changing the physical dynamic of your team and how you work, remote work really depends heavily on trust and communication. And actually, it's the communication part that actually helps to build the trust. And so I work for a company I've returned to full-time employment after 6 years, and it's a remote first company. It started as remote, so it's always baked into the culture. It's always been a great example for me that's helped me improve the way that I work remotely and work with others. But communication is absolutely key. And so you want to make sure you're maintaining that. You're frequent. If you're going to do anything in terms of communication, I would say err on the side of over communicating. Okay. Now, you want to make sure you have that balance in establishing some guidelines and protocols about availability, because one of the benefits of working remotely is hopefully having some flexibility to do things when it's a better time and taking care of things that you need to take care of. But you always want to be in communication, letting people know when you're going to be out away from your desk and not online. If you have an appointment, for instance, I started taking guitar lessons again, and now my team knows that on Thursdays at 2:30, I'm going to be gone for about an hour. I'll be back. And the Slack channel, I'm like, y'all, hey y'all, I'm gonna be gone for an hour, and I'll be back. And those kinds of things happen all the time in the team. Someone has an appointment, especially with international travel. Sometimes things come up. You have to go, not just going to things like the doctor and things like that, but you also have to go to the embassy to turn in a visa application or extension. You have to go to immigration and things like that. So, these kinds of things come up, and you just want to stay in communication. Or when things go bad, like for instance, when there's an internet outage, there's a power outage, and I have to relocate. I talk about this in my backup plan. It's like I have 2 or 3 locations around the city that if the power goes out in my neighborhood, which actually happened about a week and a half ago, it takes me 20 minutes to get to the next neighborhood over, where they're likely to not be affected by the outage over here, and they'll have internet and I can resume work. And so I'm just communicating that. Now, if you're not comfortable with this yet, if you're still used to sort of driving and commuting into an office every day, and you want to progress to not just remote work where you are, but remote work internationally, I actually suggest doing a trial run. at different phases and sort of phase it in and learn as you go. So I've done this in the past where I have done remote work at different locations. I started with remote work just domestically in the city that I'm in, my current city. So I'm working from cafes, I'm working from home, I'm working from co-working spaces, and I'm learning and finding what works best for me and my team at that distance, right? I still got a lot of comforts, a lot of familiarity. So I'm not changing too many things at one time. It's not super disruptive. And I think that's important to understand. I'm not trying to upset the entire apple cart. I have been on projects and worked where we have tried to change too many things at once to move forward, and it's an absolute disaster. So taking a methodical approach, changing one thing at a time, seeing how that works, and then adding new changes. So let me give an example and just take you to the rest of these phases. So phase one, I'm working remotely within my current city, okay? The next phase after that, I get comfortable, I start working remotely from other cities that are either within my state or within a neighboring state. So they're not far away. And I used to do this from Atlanta, working remotely in Charleston and Columbia, Greenville, driving down to Florida, driving up to Tennessee, heading to North Carolina. That's how I would do it. It's like staying in the region. And then the next phase I started doing was working remotely in my home country from a different time zone. Okay. So then maybe I'll go to New Orleans, Louisiana, I'll drive out to Austin, Texas, or something like that. And maybe out to Denver, Colorado, or to the West Coast and start seeing how that works. How is this time change working for me? How's it affecting my sleep? How's it affecting my work availability hours? How's it affecting my communication with the team? And then finally, starting to embark on these further journeys. Now I'm ready to test another country. And if you start with a neighboring country, chances are you're still within those time zones that you've worked out. So it's okay before you do something super radical and just move to the other side of the world, which is really disruptive. Fortunately, even for my remote year journey, when I was traveling, we happened to start within the same time zone. So I started in South America. So even though I wasn't in a neighboring country, I went to some countries that were still within the same time zone, within the Eastern and Central and Mountain. Now, there were technical issues, particularly 1 month in Bolivia, where there was literally no internet in the country for 2 days. But that was a byproduct of the country not quite being ready for remote work and just having to deal with that. And I did a poor job of communicating that, actually. And that was a lesson that I learned. And it was with this company I've returned to. So there's something to think about. And that takes me to the second point. Even as you're doing these trial runs and sort of phasing in your remote journey, remember your team. And when I say remember your team, not just your bosses, not just the people up the chain that you report to or whose eyes, they're looking, seeing how you're doing, but the people across and in other areas that you're working with. It's really, really important to understand how it affects their work as well. Remember, you're always in community. You're always a part of some community, and this is your work community. And you want to make sure that everybody who's a stakeholder is being in communication with you, and they understand, and that you understand how this work relationship is going. If you need to make some tweaks, if you need to make some changes, address anything, review periodically. If you notice on this channel, it's the reason why I do those bi-weekly updates of what I'm working on. It's a way for me to take stock and see how things are working. You can do that with your team. You can do that with individual team members and understand it's like, okay, I'm now in Lebanon, or I'm now in Portugal, or I'm now in South Dakota. How is that working? How is my work relationship? Am I still able to deliver? And you can kind of take some points and say, okay, are there things that need to be addressed? And even from the moving standpoint, physically, are there things that you forgot to bring? There are things that you can easily pick up in the new destination. I talked about this in the video about cutting your luggage in half. And this is a great way to sort of start to test that. Like when you go to a new place, a new state, I mean, some states, some grocery stores are different. They don't carry the same brands that you like of foods and products. So it's just like, you'll see that to varying degrees, the further and further you move away. And then you might be surprised. For instance, I moved to Mexico City. I was surprised at the number of franchises that were available that were the same back home, and even going into Walmart, finding the same brand of pickles that I used to eat back home in the Carolinas and Georgia. You never know. So take stock of those things. And in that regard, actually, I just want to plug Mexico. I'm probably going to just do a specific video why I love Mexico, but it's one of the reasons why I love Mexico as a first sort of country. If you're coming from this part of the world, if you're coming from Canada, coming from the US, even if you're coming from like Colombia or coming from some places south, Mexico has a lot of advantages. You're still in the same time zones. It's a massive country. You can find the type of environment you're looking for, whether you want beach towns, you want a small sort of colonial towns, you want a big city like Mexico City. It's all here. And it's not as disruptive. So it's something to consider when you're in that fourth phase and you want to move to a neighboring country, or maybe even phase 5 when you're ready to sort of take a big leap. I love this place. It's really great. It has a lot of advantages. I haven't found a lack of access to anything. And if the big city is not your thing. I mean, I also live in Playa del Carmen. I'm looking to try some other places like Pueblo and Oaxaca and some other places, but we'll see. But the idea is, for me, it's work is important and communicating with my team. So I'm not on vacation. I take vacations. So, but put this and consider this as a framework and a way for you to approach sort of your progression into remote work and starting to see how these other destinations work for you. Do trial runs at each phase and phase it in. Try a new country, see if it works for a month. I recommend a minimum of a month, 1 month to 3 months to really get a feel for a country. If you're thinking about permanently relocating, especially. Now, if you just want to visit, a couple of weeks to 1 month is fine, but just remember that can be disruptive. The travel days can be disruptive. Starting that new routine can be disruptive. That's one of the reasons why I kind of settle into the 1 to 3 month phase. But if you're getting started, don't be afraid to phase these things in. Do 1 month in your current city, and then try a month in the neighboring city, try a month in a neighboring state, try a month in neighboring or another time zone, and then try a neighboring country. See if that works for you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Please click the like button, comment what you think about this, if you think it could apply to you or what you've tried that works for you. As always, if you find this information helpful and you think it would help someone else, I really appreciate you sharing the channel as well. This is a very young channel. I'm just getting started and I could use all the help I can get. So as always, I really appreciate the support. I hope you have an amazing day and I will talk to you next time. Cheers.